So guys, look, I know we've talked about pros and cons. I think the biggest con that I hear from parents is I don't want to burden my child with the US tax compliance side of things. Many of them don't realize is that when their child gets to 18, between 18 and 18 and a half years old, there's a small window there where your children can effectively hand back US citizenship and say, I don't want this. There's still a fee to pay. It's a couple of $1,000s. It could be very well more than that by the time they get to 18 years old, but that's what it is right now. You can have the benefits that we talked about, the travel, child tax credit refund, the stimulus payments, all those benefits, plus you're doing the right thing and not creating a headache for them later in life. And when they get to 18, they can effectively decide whether they want to keep it or not. And they've got that 6-month window with an easy exit should they choose to take it. I think the other thing people always keep in mind is, okay, well, even if they go past 18 and a half, even if they get to 21, 30, 40, there's still a way out. It might not be easy and it might not be cheap, but ultimately there's still a way out. And, renouncing US citizenship, in my experience, is more popular than ever. The statistics don't show that, but that's because they're kind of being manipulated. But the queue is long. I guess in summary, there seems to be a lot more benefits to doing it than not. And if your biggest concern is the tax compliance burden, well, there's always a way out. There's an easy way out between 18 and 18 and a half. There's still a way out after that. As an adult, they can also decide for themselves if they want that. If you've got a 3-year-old like me, it's hard to decide right now if when they're older, they don't want to go and work in the US, they don't want to travel there freely, they might want to use the education system there. He's 3, it's 15 years away. I'm not really sure what the world will look like in 15 years' time. Probably as the world gets smaller and smaller, the world gets more connected. So I guess I wouldn't want to shut that door.
I agreed. I mean, it is an interesting point. I mean, the 18 to 18 and a half gap time period that you're referring to just is the period that is referenced within the Internal Revenue Code when someone can automatically not be regarded as what's called a covered expat when they're giving up their U.S. citizenship. And there are other conditions in play, but that's certainly one of them, is that they're not allowed to make that decision themselves until they're 18. And then the IRS says, great, now you've got 6 months. Get onto it. But yeah, they have that ability. They typically need to have been a citizen somewhere else. And that somewhere else needs to be where they're currently living as well in order to do it. So it's not as automatic as just being that age. Getting out, and I think this is a point that's been brought up previously by you, is whether it happens between 18 and 18 and a half when you have some additional ways to not be regarded as a covered expat, or you do it after you're 18 and a half and you still might not be a covered expat. You still have the ability to, as a child, to get to that age where hopefully you're a bit more mature and you make a decision about what's important to you at that particular point. But up until that point, as we've discussed, as the parent, there are some potential real benefits, for having that child have the U.S. citizenship and the Social Security number that flow onto your own tax return. And so there's a choice to be made. I guess it's good to have brought up some of those pros, though.
Look, we're all parents, right? Most parents want the best for their children. And I think for me, that's about giving them choices and options when they grow up. Why would you shut the door on something when you don't need to? You've got pros when they're a child with very few cons, all the way until they're at least 18, because they've got to start earning money before they have to start filing tax returns anyway. They've got a somewhat easy way out before that happens. So you can have all these benefits without any drawbacks. Let them get to 18, let them decide, with or without you, let them decide what they want to do, and then shut the door if that's what you decide to do. But you would have had an awful lot of benefits all the way through to that point in time.
I was going to raise one more point, and that is a lot of American parents living and working outside the U.S. have had banking considerations whereby the bank will ask them whether they're a U.S. person or not for purposes of signing the FATCA form requirements. There may be cases where U.S. citizen parents living and working outside the U.S. are thinking of opening bank accounts outside the U.S. on behalf of their minor children. And they may not have thought about how or when that should be done, but if they are thinking of opening bank accounts and if their child is already a U.S. citizen, then they have to answer the questions in the appropriate manner on those forms. Otherwise, that can be creating problems for the child later on.
Because they legitimately could be ticking a box to say, I'm not a US citizen, because they genuinely believe they aren't. Mm-hmm. But actually, they actually really are. That's a really good point. I hadn't even thought of the FBARs and the FATCA part of it. You could be answering that document incorrectly, unknowingly, but still false declaration nevertheless. We talked a lot about benefits when they're a child and when they're growing up too. But is there any big ones that you guys think we might have missed?
I think in addition to the freedom to travel and live and work and retire in the U.S., one thing that I do see come up with my clients is that often people choose to buy property in the U.S. But when you want to buy property in the U.S., that generally means getting a mortgage in the U.S. And when you want to get a mortgage in the U.S., often the first question the bank will ask is, are you a U.S. citizen or not? And have you proof that you've been filing your tax returns or not? If you're not clear on those questions, that can prevent you from getting a mortgage and prevent you from being able to buy a property in the U.S.
That's a really good one. I can't believe I forgot about that one. I've actually had clients go through that exact situation. You're right about the tax return does catch people out sometimes when they haven't filed them and they found a house that they love and they go for the mortgage and you're like, where's your last 3 tax returns? And they're like, what? I've been living abroad for many years and I haven't got any. So they quickly come and get them done.
To follow that up, it's a truism, I think. More than happy to allow you to buy a property. And actually, the U.S. is probably one of the most lenient countries in the world for allowing non-citizens to buy property within the U.S. There are fewer restrictions there than almost any other country. But that is assuming, of course, that you're buying it with cash. Once you need to get a loan from a U.S. bank, especially, and you don't, leaving aside the tax returns to be able to prove what you've been doing, it's having the appropriate credit rating to show that you can repay those loans, which if you've had that U.S. citizenship, you've had that U.S. Social Security number, you may have also therefore had that travel to the U.S. and established some form of record, in the U.S. for doing so. People use property as a method of accumulating wealth that does therefore give more of an ease towards that line of strategy if you've got all those things in place already.
Guys, thanks very much for joining me on the call. It was really insightful to hear those bits and pieces from you on this topic. I know it's something that a lot of parents do struggle with and talk about a lot before they make a decision. So hopefully we've helped. We might have to field questions from this video and then maybe come and do another video if you would be so kind and maybe answer some of those questions from people who watch it. But thank you very much.
Thank you.
Sure. Thank you.